Straight from South Africa.
This is the strange
and mysterious world with your hosts, Lee Stratum and William Collinson.
And welcome to Strange and Mysterious World, Season 1, Episode 11. And Happy New Year to everybody. This is going to be a fantastic year, 2024. William, I feel in my bones, but I feel it's going to be a really, really good one this year. What do you think?
Yeah, geez, I hope so, man. I hope all the prophecies and things we've been seeing on the internet about this year are true. You know, the ascension into the 5D. So
yeah, well, let's see.
Well,
apparently, there's supposed to be alien. What's it? The
disclosure,
contacts, and all that kind of stuff's happening this year. So hopefully,
let's hope it happens this year. Apparently, we ascended into the fifth dimension already. Well, I don't know. I've got a guy that actually knows a lot about that stuff. We'll have him on because I'm doing a documentary now. So I'm not going to give too much away because I'm going to be interviewing him, and
Okay.
he was talking to me a lot about that kind of stuff. So I look forward to have him on.
All right, Joe, we must definitely bring him on. And you were telling me with our Monroe Institute course that we're currently doing, the OBE course, the Outer Body Experience. Apparently, you experienced something quite lekker last week.
Yes. So just for our listeners that don't know, that a few episodes back, we did a thing on out of body experiences, and me and Lee have got the gateway experience, and we've been doing that. We'll try and do it every night. I mean, sometimes I just don't get to it, but. So I did have an interesting experience, like I explained on a few episodes ago, but just recently I had a really profound experience that so it was, when was it? It was
I think it was on, if I can remember, we had a chat on Wednesday. So
yeah, so I'm just
this last Wednesday.
Because I remember I did a lot of surfing. So, and usually like I was really tired. When I went to bed, I'm just trying to think of all the things that could have like helped it, you know? So I did like a lot of surfing. I probably surfed for like 4 hours or something, like 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evening. So I was really tired when I went to bed. And what I did differently this time was that listening to the disc while going to bed, I just because there's a lot of times where he's not talking and there's just the binaural beats, that white noise going off, and there's no like it's just description of what to do or whatever, and so I'm just lying there, and usually this is where I fall asleep during the disc. So I thought I'm just going to practice like an out of body technique that I've learned from all of the other literature, and anybody wants to know what techniques we're talking about, go to the previous episode of out of body experiences. So I just thought, let me just practice one of these ones. So I did the visual one where you visualize objects around a room. And so I was lying there and I was visualizing, and nothing happened. I fell asleep. And then I woke up at 4 in the morning, or 3. I don't know if it was 4 or 3. Or usually when I wake up at that time, I do like some breath work and I meditate, and then I go back to bed because otherwise I just stay awake. So I did all of that. And this time when I went back to bed, I just did the visualization, the out-of-body technique of the visualization one. And I fell asleep. But then I woke up in the middle of the night. Well, not wake up, I came out of my body. But the thing is, it doesn't, like same with the last experience, like when they describe the literature, it's like realer than real. They explain it like it's so profound that it changes your life forever. So like, I don't think I'm having a proper full out of body experience. I think it's just more of a lucid dreaming, but I'm excited because it's like something. So like, I kept on coming out of my body. Like I would feel like I would suddenly lift up out, but then I would be in like, I wouldn't be in the room as such where I'm sleeping and looking. I'll be like in a completely different environment with like different people. And I mean, the one I remember, I came out and there was these 2 girls in this kitchen, and I was like sitting there talking to them, and I kept on saying like, write down that I was here, write down I was here because I'm going to disappear, write down that I was here. And then and we were having this argument. But I mean, it was very real. I mean, like I could feel the table when I touched it, and I could like see them, and it was very real. And I kept on saying, you got to write this down because I'm going to disappear right now. And they wouldn't write anything down. And I said, bye-bye. And then I went in my bed. But then every time, I mean, it would carry on going. I would be in different situations with different people, and like I would also be able to touch things and like feel it with my hands in that. Like I'd feel the sensation in my hands. And then I would come back into the I'd come back into the room, but every time I came back into my room that I was staying in, that because I was actually house sitting in my friend's house, I kept on looking at this window because there was all this light coming, and I would never know where I was. And I was like, oh my gosh, where am I? Am I in another out of body thing, or am I back to normal? And then I would slowly start thinking, okay, now I'm back in the room. And then I would try and fall asleep again, and then it would just happen again. I would just get this floating sensation on my body, and then I would just be in another like place talking to other people or wherever, and it kept on going. But then when I started coming out and like realizing, okay, I'm out again, but this time I wasn't getting that extreme terrifying. Remember, I kept on saying every time it was happening, and the last time I'd get this absolute terror, and then I couldn't see anything, I couldn't move or whatever. But this time, like I kept on going into all of these different places and then coming back and then not realizing if I was in the room or not. And then, yes, and then when I went out, I actually remembered, like I was like, okay, I'm out now. Let me fly. And then I would actually start flying, and the sensation that I was getting was so amazing. It was like, when you're in a roller coaster and you get those butterflies in your stomach and everything. So it was very real. I was like flying, but I wasn't flying anywhere I knew. I was just flying over like this ocean, and I could see all of the patterns of the sand under the water, and like the green like vegetation under the water, whatever. And it was so exciting. And then then I'd try and dive into the water. I would just go straight down, and then, but it was really like I was on a roller coaster. I'd get all the air blowing on me, and I'd feel the extreme like like butterflies in my stomach. And then as I hit the water, I would wake up. And then I kept on doing this. I'd come out again, and I'd be in like a room or something, and then I'd just be like, okay, I'm going to fly. And then I'd run, and I'd dive through the wall, and I could feel the sensation of the wall going through me, and then I'd be out flying. But then the one time I tried, and I ran, and I jumped, and I got stuck right on the wall. Like my forehead went into the wall, and it hit something, and I got stuck there. And I could feel it on my forehead, like a bar or something, and I got stuck there. And then I'd wake up. And I mean, it was very exciting. I was so excited. But the thing is, it wasn't as real as real. I could just say my consciousness is at a 10, and like my dreams are like maybe at a 3, because like a lot of the time when I wake up, I can't even remember. This was maybe at like a 6 or like a 7, maybe, like like realness. So it was like a very, very like real dream. It wasn't like and also like I remember the one time I came out, and I thought I was in the bedroom, and I turned around to like look to see if I was sleeping or whatever. And then like there was just someone sitting on the bed. And then I would like look around, and I wasn't actually in my room. I was like in some completely different environment. And then I'd like wake up. And then also the one time I came out, and I was just floating, and it was the most amazing sensation of floating. But I wasn't like, I couldn't see anything or anything. It was just dark, but I was just floating, and it was the most beautiful sensation. It was like I don't know if it was definitely not like I was in water. It was like I don't know how to explain it, like an air, like I was just air, like just floating, but I was in a form. But I couldn't really recognize my form, but I was like something just floating, and and it was beautiful, and I was just like enjoying this floating sensation. And then after this happened for so much during the night, I actually started getting worried. I was like, oh my gosh, if this just carries on happening, I'm never going to sleep properly, because I just kept on going and coming back and waking up and going and waking up. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I've got things to do tomorrow. I'm going to like, I don't know what's like, I'm going to be so tired tomorrow if I just don't get a proper night's sleep. And then after I thought that, then I just went to sleep, and I slept the rest of the night.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty interesting, man. That's pretty cool. At least you got stuff happening to you, man.
Yeah.
The only thing that happens to me is I fall asleep with my headphones on, and then I wake up at 2 in the morning because my headphones are hurting my ears. And then I wake up again at 6 in the morning. Nothing's happening on my side.
Man, just try to do one of the techniques, the out of body techniques, visualizations, or the rolling, the the ladder
roll out
technique
technique,
or the
the one that,
rollout
yeah,
technique or something, just try something like that, just as you're falling asleep. That's what's, I mean, but then also then I
yeah,
got so excited, then I started doing it again, like every night since then, and nothing's happened again. So I don't know what, but I also haven't even been waking up in the middle of the night. Because that's
yeah,
also another technique that they describe as the wake back to bed technique, where there is a technique where you
yeah.
wake up in the middle of the night, you put your alarm on 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up, stay awake for an hour, and then try and go back to bed and do a visualization. And then that's another. So, yeah, but I haven't been waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning by myself anymore.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. No, cool, man. At least, like I said, at least you've got some like stuff happening with you. All right. So, as promised, we're going to be chatting about Atlantis, probably a little bit about Lemuria as well today. Atlantis, I know, look, there's two guys that have, guys in the past that have spoken about Atlantis, in my opinion, that have been of note, which would be Plato. Obviously, he was the first to chat about Atlantis. He mentioned that in his writings, the Critias and the Timesius, I think it was called, the other one. But then my favorite oak is Edgar Cayce with regards to Atlantis. I think there were a couple of similarities between the two. So maybe, I'm not sure the one that you were reading, was that more around Plato's Atlantis?
No,
Your book?
I was reading Rudolf Steiner's.
Rudolf Steiner. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
So, and I did read Plato's one, but I mean, that was, I mean, it was so brief and it was so boring. Like it just,
Yeah. Yeah, with Plato, the thing with Plato's Atlantis story, he didn't hear it. He didn't hear that firsthand. It came from an Egyptian priest originally in the story about Atlantis, but he didn't hear it firsthand from the priest. He actually heard it from his grandfather, who heard it in turn from one of the diplomats of Athens, who had heard it from a priest 300 years prior.
yeah.
So look, so it's not really firsthand stuff, but be that as it may, the things that he said were actually pretty interesting. So Atlantis apparently sank. So if you think Plato was around about 390 BC, roundabout, Atlantis sank 9,000 years prior to that. Okay, which means, we've always been going on about pre-civilizations.
Yeah.
That there's a pre-civilization, a pyramid building civilization. This actually starts leaning now more towards the things that I believe. So, all right. So they sunk 9,000 years ago. At that time, they were at war with Athens. Now I thought, but that's strange because Athens was only supposed to be like founded in, I don't know, 5,000 BC or something to that extent. So this is going back 4,000 years, even prior to that, when Athens was at war with Atlantis. And Athens managed to push Atlantis back because I think they were invading. Now, if you think where Atlantis is and where Greece is in the Mediterranean, which means Atlantis must have been pretty close. So I know they say it's through the Straits of Gibraltar, I think, where that's the Pillars of Hercules, where he apparently pushed the two mountains apart and created the Strait of Hercules. Now, it couldn't be too far beyond that. And in Plato's description of some of the animals, the exotic animals in Atlantis, one of the mentions is elephants. Where do you find abundant elephants? In Africa? I mean, elephants are massive in Africa. So my opinion then is Atlantis must have been very close to the Mediterranean and very close to the African continent. The Atlantis itself was apparently supposed to be the size, if you look at Edgar Cayce now, he mentions this, it was the size of Libya and Asia Minor. Now, if you compare the two, if you put the two together, it's bigger than Australia. So that's, I know he says it's an island, but Australia is not an island, dude. That's like a continent. Okay.
Yeah.
And apparently it experienced quite a few upheavals and floods, and it sank, and then so there are still a few islands that are around that I think were origins Atlantis originally, but I think most of the stuff has sunk. It's definitely in the Atlantis. That's in the Atlantic Ocean. That's for sure, because the Atlantic Ocean was named after the first king of Atlantis, which was Atlas. He was the son of Poseidon. And Atlantis was obviously named after him as well. So I think there's a lot of truth to the story, William. I'll be honest. I don't think it's a myth. Because Edgar Cayce, when he came in now and started talking about, okay, let's talk a bit about Edgar Cayce. Let's introduce him a little bit. So Edgar Cayce was born in 1877 in Kentucky. He was, I'm not going to say lazy. He was probably like me at school. He just didn't focus. His focus was cuck at school. And his grades weren't fantastic, and the teachers used to complain about him to his parents. And I think at the age of 9, he saw his grandfather, the ghost of his grandfather. And then a little bit later on in his life, he was walking around in the woods, and he saw apparently a woman with wings, which was an angel for him. Okay. And this angel said that they would help him whenever he needed it. Now, when he was at home and his grades were so cuck, his dad, they were sitting on a chair, and his dad pushed him off a chair. And when he landed on the floor, he actually heard the voice of the woman say to him, go to sleep and we will help you. So his dad obviously left, and he closed the book and he went to sleep on his book. He actually put his head down on the book and he went to sleep. And when he woke up, and his dad came back. His dad questioned him about the book, and he actually knew everything that was in the book. So that's absolutely phenomenal. He said he could see every page in the book without even opening it. And this is actually how he studied for the rest of his life. He did this. This was the technique he used. Hey, how amazing is that? Shit, I want to be a doctor, dude. I'm going to go and buy a couple of books, go and sleep on it.
Could he learn like 6 books at a time, or do you just have to do one a night?
Geez, can you imagine? I'd save myself so much money. But anyway, so he then, that's about when he was young, that's about the most that it gets to. Nothing really much happens until he starts his working career. And I know he develops quite a bad case of laryngitis where he can't talk. It's like so bad that he can't talk. But he manages to, I think he went under hypnosis with a friend of his there when he went under hypnosis. And this subconscious being came through and said to the hypnotherapist, listen, tell him this is what he needs to do to fix his throat. This, that, and the next thing. And then when he woke up, he said, oh, by the way, you told me to tell you this is how you fix your throat. And he's like, what? He said, yeah, you must do this. So he did it, and it worked. And it kind of grew from there. So this is why he was called the sleeping prophet, because he would put himself into, later on in life, he'd put himself into a self-hypnotized state, and the subconscious entity would come through and give all these readings and healings and all sorts of stuff. And can you please cure this, that, next thing? And then he would be able to cure them through their letters, because obviously it was something that they had written down. So it's something from them that he was able to use. Now, I would, in the beginning, I thought, I don't know, this doesn't sound right, but there were so many reports of people that came through to say all the stuff that he did for them healed them. Okay. And the great thing about it was he never, in his entire life, he never charged for any of his readings. It was always free. So for the healing, it was free because he was a very devout Christian. And he was actually a Sunday school teacher. Besides being a photographer later on in life, he was a Sunday school teacher. So he was very devout. And something happened later on in one of his sessions that kind of shocked him, because the story of Atlantis came up. And I think he read something like 14,000 readings. Okay. And Atlantis came up, and he spoke about reincarnation, or the entity, I can't say let's say the entity that was in him spoke about reincarnation and spoke about ancient civilizations. Now, as a Christian, he didn't believe that stuff. So when he came out of it, and the people that had made documents and notes of it, they said to him, oh, so you were speaking to us about your reincarnation and this, that, next thing, and the ancient civilization. And he was like, what? No, it can't be. So he was very dubious of whatever this thing that was talking. He was very worried. He actually lost, I think, his second child to some disease because he didn't cure. I think he was too worried to take on whatever this entity was saying to believe. I think he got too worried in case he committed murder of some sorts, like he would give somebody information and say, okay, you need to do this, that, next thing. And this person dies. Then he's got murder on his shoulders. And he was like terrified of that, absolutely terrified of that. But when his wife got cancer, he managed to do this whole thing again. And he came through, the entity came through and told him how to heal his wife, which he did, and it worked. So this thing that was in him obviously knew what it was doing, knew the past, and it was true. The stuff that was going on in his life and the things he was doing was actually true. So now if we go back to Atlantis with his start of his stories, I find it fascinating because one of the things that he mentions is, that there were two continents, extra continents, Lemuria as well, and Atlantis. Now, Lemuria was situated in the Pacific. That there was something like 500,000 years ago. Lemuria came into, the Lemurians were running around on that planet, on that continent. The Atlanteans only came in 250,000 years ago. So Lemuria was there way before Atlantis. All right. Now, in Lemuria, they talk about giants that exist on Lemuria. Giants had 6 fingers, 6 toes. They range between 10, 12 feet, which is between 3 and 4 meters in height. Now, where else do we see that? If you go to the giants of Goth in the Bible, which Goliath was one of them. Goliath was said to have 6 fingers and 6 toes. There are giants throughout the Pacific Rim where you've got these depictions on walls, wall carvings of 6 feet, 6 toes and 6 fingers. This is not just a story, dude. There's something there. And I don't think this is a made-up story. I think there is truth to this. Now, what I was saying about Atlantis now. So apparently there were these spirit beings that came through to Atlantis, and they took on physical form, but they got trapped in physical form. And they were androgynous. Do you know what androgynous is? It's like when you both sexes in one. Yes, correct. Yeah. Okay.
Like aristocracy.
Yeah. Now, apparently people at that time, so sex wasn't a thing. I mean, when you decided to have your children, you would just make it happen. Okay. It was later on when the sons of there were two factions on Atlantis. There's a group called the sons of Belial, and another group called the children of the one, the law of one, the children of the law of one. Okay, which I think we've actually heard the stories about the law of one. There's a whole big thing which we'll do another podcast on that. But the children of Belial, the Belial is actually a word in Hebrew which means evil. Do you remember the last podcast we spoke about the dude with his donkey? He was that evil prophet.
Yeah.
Yeah, his name was Belial. So he was the wicked prophet. So anyway, these sons were the wicked sons, and they were technology driven. Atlantis apparently in those days had this massive crystal which they got from Lemuria, and it controlled everything in the city. Everything from electricity, because apparently they had electricity very similar to what we have currently today, but I think it was more on what Nikola Tesla had brought through in his times, with free electricity. They were using crystals for that. They were using crystals to literally for everything. For travel, they were able to move around in these craft. This is also the reasons why you'll see these similar cultures around the world, because they were easily able to get to the different continents and mix culturally. Okay. But the sons of the technology sons, the sons of Belial, they decided to stuff around, and they manipulated the weather, like what they're doing today with HARP in America. They stuffed around so much that it caused massive storms, and this is actually what ended up flooding Atlantis. Okay. Now, the androgyny thing, just going back to that quickly. They eventually separated and they became male and female. All right. Now, I find that interesting because in the Bible, if you look at Adam and Eve, Adam was alone. Adam was on his own for many, many hundreds of years. All right. And I know it was a day in God's 1,000 years is a day in God's workings, but it could be a lot longer. But anyway, so he was alone for hundreds of years. I know, and you know, as a male, when you hit the age of 11 through to probably the age of about 40, procreation is quite a relevant thing. Okay, so you are wanting to have sex often, especially when you're young. It's just one of those. It's one of those natural tendencies, dude.
You're trying to politely or like PC say that you're just horny all the time.
Yeah, you just horny all the time. I don't want to say, but yeah. Now, Adam must have been horny all the time, dude. Can you imagine living 300 years and you ever had a woman, hey?
So he said ends at 40.
No, but remember, he lived for 900 years. So I'm trying to put it into context. So 300 years in, he's like, geez, like, and then obviously God felt sorry for him and said, hey, no, all right, let's make a partner for you. And then Eve came from him.
He's busy just dry humping trees in the garden. Like he's just walking around.
Well, apparently they tested out a couple of the things, and none of them were suitable. So they landed up pulling
gee, that's
pulling
nice,
Eve from him. But anyway, so that's the androgyny thing. I think Adam was actually androgynous, and Eve was pulled from him, which is what it says in the Bible. Eve came from him. Although it says it's a rib, I think they got that a bit of a misunderstanding. But yeah, he was androgynous, and there you go. That's how Eve popped around, came from him. And if you look around the world, even in the Hindu stuff and the Sumerian things, there's always depictions of people with a woman face and man face on one body, 4 arms, 4 legs. You know what I mean? So there's depictions all around the world of this stuff, and I find it fascinating, dude. Seriously. So I do think Atlantis existed. I think it without a doubt. I know. Look, I know Atlantis was huge with gold and silver, and there was something called orichalcum or some weird. It was a zinc copper mix, which had plenty of this apparently. And they used to build these cities out of these things. So yeah, I know if you look at the Quran, it mentions about some city that actually some lost city that's buried in the desert somewhere. That might be more towards the Lemurian side of things, though. But hey, I find it fascinating. I'll be honest, especially with Edgar Cayce. I mean, with his readings and the things that have come through and his prophecies that he's had. He actually said, talking about Atlantis again, the Hall of Records. There's 2 Hall of Records that have been that were taken from Atlantis before it sunk. One set of records was in the Yucatan, sent to South America, sent to South America, and the other was sent to Egypt, and it's apparently under the Great Pyramid or between the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. Apparently, there's a Hall of Records there.
Or under the Sphinx pause.
Yeah.
The whole thing about under the Sphinx pause, they don't want to like excavate there now. The main guy that is in charge of all of that in Egypt won't let anybody go underneath the Sphinx pause, even though there's all this what do you call it? I don't know, evidence or whatever to show that there is something under the Sphinx pause, and they want to excavate, but they will not be allowed to.
Yeah, I think that's silly. I mean, if there's something there, just get it out, man, and let's show everybody what is there.
Yeah, no,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
and then obviously from there, I mean, there's a lot of theories and stories. So I don't know if you remember the Olmecs. The Olmecs also in South America, it's like a mixed race because they found a lot of artifacts that had sort of African origin, Asian origin. But apparently the Olmecs were there prior to the Mayans, which were there prior to the Aztecs. So it goes way back. So I think remnants of Atlantis managed to land up in South America, and this is also why you had all these pyramids that were being built and similar things around the world. So yeah, I do think remnants landed up in South America. I think remnants landed up in Egypt, some around Asia. And then obviously the remnants from Lemuria came in from, were coming in through from India and all those other places. So I definitely think these two continents existed, and I definitely think we had our origins more than likely coming in from this side, from these two. That's my opinion. That's my opinion.
Yeah.
And Rudolf Steiner, what does he have to say about it now, bud?
So Rudolf Steiner, it's quite interesting because look, in the modern mystery school that I'm like initiative of, they actually have a class called the 12 root races, which they talk about Lemuria and Atlantis and a lot of other root races, which is really awesome. That class is actually open for the public. You don't actually even have to be an initiate to go and take that class. So you could take it. But I'm not going to say anything that's in that class because obviously, you know, you pay money to do it. And I mean, if I just come here and just blurt it out on the internet for free, that's
Yeah,
like
of course.
the karma that I probably get from that. So, but anyway, but the thing was that with Rudolf Steiner's, because Rudolf Steiner anyway, he's a theosophist, and also he's a high initiate of Rosicrucianism, and obviously I'm sure other things he's been initiate in as well. And also when he starts off in the book, he actually says he can't go so far as saying everything, because he says if you're an initiative, you would understand like why this is so that that they can't just give out all the information. And I mean, so obviously if you know you have to and I'll talk a bit about that while we go on, but he says that what is written in theosophy is that what he can talk about, and obviously I think he talks about it because it is close as what he has learned as an initiative of a mystery schools.
What were the similarities? I'm assuming what did he say the same year? Was it the same type of year? Was it around 9,000 BC, roundabout?
So basically what he says about so there was the Lemurians. Oh yes, and also what I also found was fascinating is that you speak to the New Age guys, and they're all like, yeah, no, I had my Akashic records read, and I'm from Lemuria, and like I was in the ships, and I went and I was getting crystals out of the walls, and like I was in charge of like the crystals and the airships but like I don't know, when you in Rudolf Steiner's fine and like other sources you find that actually Lemuria, I mean, what I found in my research is that they actually were very primitive, basic people. But they were basically the first root race. And like in the mystery school, the modern mystery school I've got is these 12 root races, and Rudolf Steiner talks about 7 root races. And the Lemuria was the first root race, apparently, to these, like, as I say,
Rudolf Steiner.
Discernment, like, with so much information out there, you just got to, we're not saying that this is true or whatever. It's just that you've got to take your sermon and judge for yourself about your own research. But he said that root race, Lemuria was the first root race. And basically the veil with humans, then there was no veil. So like, people could communicate with spirits. They could communicate with the rocks, the trees, the earth, like everything was there. There was no will and there was no thought. Humans did not have any thought then. It wasn't developed yet in their consciousness. Everything was just guided by the will of the plants, the animals, and these higher beings. And also everything was telepathic. And they could make certain noises just to describe pain or like happiness or whatever, but most of it was just like a thought transfer of images and stuff like that. And everything was based on a memory of some sort, but not in the. He says it must be confused with an instinct as like animals, but it was like some memory. But like he doesn't really go into much about how the memory works or whatever. But it's I don't know if it's guided from where they came from, or I don't know, but some kind of instinct. But he says it's not as like animal instinct is. And he says that so that and the children had to be hardened, like in the community, like they had to go through severe like schools of pain and endurance and like kind of suffering to toughen them up, because they weren't actually helpful in the community or whatever, or if they could not face extreme danger and pain. And the women were also like kind of also hardened in a similar sort of way. But and then he says that actually that evil actually came from women, because once their consciousness started developing, and this is like in the third root race, so it became Atlantis after the Lemuria. Atlanteans came from the Lemurians, and then the consciousness started developing a little bit further, and they started getting into their consciousness thought, where they could actually start thinking and planning and having logical kind of logic was starting to develop. But that only started actually, well, according to Steiner, actually happened in the third root race. So the concept of thought or planning or like logic only started really developing in the third sub-root race from the Atlanteans, was the Momohals. And as in just to tell you where Steiner's getting this information, he's getting it from the Akashic records, which he says that, and he actually has a book where he describes how to access the Akashic records, how to get there, which I'm excited to read. But it's funny about the Akashic records, because a lot of the New Age people, they're all like, yeah, the Akashic records, like, I can do it and whatever and whatnot. But then in some mystery schools, they say that that's a lot of bullshit. There's no way, and there's not a chance you can access the Akashic records. There's no way of getting that information. It's like banned. There's no way. So that they but I don't know which is right or which is wrong. But maybe if they can't, and they're accessing some kind of form of information somewhere, maybe it's not the Akashic records and something else. But anyway, Steiner describes it as the Akashic records. Also, another interesting thing about Rudolf Steiner, he actually started the Waldorf school. I went to a Waldorf school after, I got expelled from 2 schools, and that was the only school that would accept at the end. And it was always sort of like this, like a school for like
special kids,
but
needs.
But it's like a German. It's a German school. Well, no, they don't speak German, but it's like it's just a free thinking school. He developed it, and
like a holistic thoughts, physical, mental, spiritual, playful.
Yes, but I mean, we did a lot of science and but I mean, we would do science for like most of the day instead of like one subject for like a term, and then we do maths for most of the day for like another term, and we'd keep on changing like that.
Apparently, the Waldorf schools will. You can tell me this because you were there, but apparently the Waldorf schools, there was supposed to be a balance. Like with normal schools, you go in, you start at 7:30 in Joburg. If you're in Joburg, in Durban, I think it's probably 8 o'clock. But you start at 7:30, you finish at 1:30. You have your 2 breaks in between of 15 minutes each. You get schlepped off to each class. Yeah, you're doing maths, then you're doing science, then you're doing biology, then you're doing English, then you're doing Afrikaans, then home economics, whatever it is what you're doing. And you would do that day in and day out. But the Waldorf schools, apparently, they add in a lot of creativity. So you've got like sort of art things that you're doing, and you're playing musical instruments, and you're doing all that. You're kind of getting your
a lot of like I mean, we even had a juggling class. You learn how to juggle, and like a lot of like kind of arts and crafts stuff. Yeah, there was a lot of that, and also we wore civvies, which was quite cool. And anyway, sorry, geez.
Civvies for those who don't know is actually your code of dress. Like most of our schools in South Africa, you've got to wear uniform. Civvies is just like your normal t-shirt, pants and khakis, sneakers. Yeah.
But sorry, I digress so much. But anyway, so then what was interesting about the Atlantis that Rudolf Steiner says that they could harness the energy from plants, especially from seeds, because like seeds have a special life force energy inside them to make them obviously blossom and grow and turn into a tree or flower or whatever, the bush or whatever. So that they could actually harness that energy, and they would use that energy in like that was their main source of energy. And he said that they had airships, and they would power the airships with this energy from the life force of seeds and plants, which we've lost that ability now, and that's why we learned how to make fire. And now that's where all of our energy comes from, as a heat source. So, and also what he said is that people had such an understanding of the nature behind everything that they didn't have to have like a math or science to like understand how much a block of rock, how heavy it was, or how much another block of rock would be able to hold it or whatever. They could just see it innately in the actual intrinsic like workings of it, like this almost like a knowing that they could see like what was going on in this like structure and everything, that it would know how much that would be able to hold, or how much pressure a branch would take to break it. They wouldn't have to calculate that. They could just see it innately in the actual forces of what was holding it together, like how much it could actually weigh. So they didn't have to have all of that science and math to work it out. It was just like a knowledge they could just gain by just knowing what's going on inside of it. So yeah, and then after that there was so then the Aryans. Apparently the Aryans came after that. The Aryans, which are actually a lot of what we are today.
So look, I know the Cayce records is supposed to be, according to Edgar Cayce, because his entity, the one that was doing all the subconscious talking, also got his information from the Cayce records. And apparently it's actually in the dream world, the subconscious world. And that everything in the universe is connected in the subconscious world. Everything that has some sort of thought is connected in the subconscious world. And this is why, we are able to move around freely in the dream world. And you're able to do anything and see anything and talk to anything. If you want to talk to a dog, your dog can probably chat to you in the dream world. So you might think it's dreaming, but I think that on the subconscious level, everything is connected on the dream world.
Yeah.
Which
Sure.
I find quite interesting.
So the Manus was the next subrace, along with the Aryans, and this is where
the Manus. That sounds Polynesian. Is that like where the Samoans and the Tongans and when it was all one group, I think it was. Like
but that's what they say that the Lemurians actually look like. They look like these like people that have like tattoos and like a bit of a darker complexion and
the Maoris.
So so the Manus were the next sub root race. And that's where fire and religion, this is where the veil started like leaving, and this is where they became completely like logical and thought. Their organ of thought like grew to such a size that the veil wasn't so thin anymore, and then they didn't have all their psychic abilities, and it was only a few that actually had that, and those would become like the people that were the rulers of the the world, because everybody had to find out everything about Earth and their experience just through the five senses. So they had to piece everything together just through their five senses, and they didn't have this communication from other higher beings guiding them and directing them in how the world worked in that. And before that, everybody knew that there was a supreme force that governed everything in the world. And then when they lost that with the Manus, then the thing is also because they had such free will now that they weren't actually allowed to know anything about the mysteries until they actually gave up until they actually acknowledged that there was a supreme force guarding everything behind that, so that they were left to figure it all out with their five senses until they came to that knowledge. And then that's only when they would be able to be accepted into mystery schools, because the mystery schools started in the Manus, and that was because when you were ready, you could actually get initiated, which meant that you could actually, what they call intercourse with the gods. So that's when you would be able to receive the information from other entities, higher, dimensional entities. They weren't of the earthbound nature, to get, higher information. And that's where the mystery schools, and that's where the priests came from, and everything that would guide humanity further. And and yeah, so I thought that was quite interesting. And
That kind of makes sense. Well, sorry, man, that makes quite a lot of sense if you're going back biblical things. So now let's say prior to the Manu, there was that other group which were, let's put it in nice words, they were Dolph. Okay, they kind of they're not on the same. I shouldn't say Dolph. That's the wrong word. They were not on the same sort of intellect as the later guys, the guys when the veil was lifted. Now, doesn't that sound very similar to when Adam and Eve were running around in the Garden of Eden?
yes,
They actually didn't know. They didn't actually know anything about what was going on at that time. It was only the veil was lifted later when she apparently ate the apple.
well, I mean, the veil was closed. They closed
Yes,
it.
and then it got
So,
yeah.
so that's also so that's what also Steiner was saying is that actually the evil came from women because
Okay.
because their imaginative experience was more stronger than men because men just led with will and women led with imagination, and then they became so like in love with this imagination that everything that was that they got attracted to, or like that they felt, because also feelings started becoming more intense, and then what they felt that they enjoyed or liked or got attracted to, that was good, and anything other than that was evil. So it was actually the concept of good and evil was actually born within women that brought it um to society, and that's also what I found interesting because that's also in the Bible, like
Yeah.
Eve ate the apple and then fucked it all up for us.
So the apple sounds like which I've always believed sounds like some sort of information. So she didn't eat an apple, obviously. I mean, that's just the stupid thing. That's just the
Yeah, she
you know,
got that knowledge or
she
that
took something in, so which is knowledge and understanding, and then she went and passed it to Adam, and then he kind of, and that's why the eyes were open because they started understanding the world around them, where previously they didn't. In the way, yeah, I don't know. It's a bit it's a bit hard to explain, but I think that yeah, that's that's very possible where the idea of Adam and Eve came from. Just a very
yeah,
shortened
so
version of it.
yeah, exactly. And then what also I find interesting is he goes on a lot about the absolute significance of like the masculine and feminine energy, like how it's both very divine in its own way, and like actually nothing in nature or humanity can't work without the balance of it. And when I say balance, it doesn't mean like 50-50%. Like with us, like apparently the soul is a 50-50%, like it's you want to say androgynous or whatever, but then when you're in a body, it's like 70, if you're in a male body, 70% male and 30% female. So that's the balance. And if it's in female, it's 30%, it's 70% female and 30% male. That's the right balance when you talk about balance, not 50-50. So, but it's all of this in nature has to have this right balance. That's why it's just so irritating nowadays with this whole concept of like, you know what I'm talking about, like with
Yeah, sure.
it's like it's so perverted. It's just all about like, who you want to bone. That's the preference of what you are now. So like, and I don't actually have an understanding of like how important the masculine and feminine energy together is in this world, and how it actually is such an important thing about guarding all forces in nature and everything. And now we've come with this perverted idea of it and just fuck it all up. And
Does he mention anything about the androgynous beings? Does
yeah,
he
so
say
he
anything?
does. He says that before with the Lemurians, it actually
Yeah.
started, yes, with androgyny. It was there were
Okay.
androgyny
Okay.
beings. Yeah, that's right. It did start like that, and then obviously it's so weird because it says that the bodies we were actually plastic, and then the moon came from the earth and the sun came from the earth. I mean, I don't know how that works or like what kind of, I mean, because so also what's very important is it actually starts off with the book. He says that everybody like goes, everybody that's doing archaeology and everything and trying to find out things, we're doing it all with our five senses. And he says it only can take us a certain amount, and it's actually quite useless because, well, not useless, but he says it's like it only can take us so far. But if
Limited.
we want to really know the truth, and I've said this before on another program before you read this book, is that you have to go into the divine and get the answers from like beyond the veil and the Akashic records and whatever. And But then he also says, but you must be careful because it is not always correct. He says that. He says it's not always correct. Getting that information from outside of our normal realms of consciousness, but it is more correct and more accurate than what we are trying to do with our five senses, trying to figure out, what happened, who built the pyramids, who built that, he says that it is more accurate than that, but you must be careful because it's not always so accurate. And I also find that because when I see psychics in that, a lot of the time, like, a lot of the stuff they tell me doesn't happen or doesn't come true or whatever, but, some stuff is correct. And so it's like also like how you interpret it, like how the information comes through, whatever. It's, you can distort it from however, your upbringing or how you interpret. I don't know if it comes in pictures or whatever. You could interpret it badly. Also, how you're feeling that day. I mean, there could be so many variations of how you could get distorted that information. But he does say that, and he says that we mustn't. You must be careful because it might not be completely true, but it is more reliable than how we're getting the information with how we're doing it scientifically. So then he goes on about the moon coming from the earth and the sun coming from the earth. So I don't know how that is possible or whatever, or how you interpret that from reading the Akashic records or whatever. But beings were on earth before there was a moon. And
yeah, I heard that story.
And I also heard like stories of that, and like paintings of caves and stuff. Only there was no moons, and these whole stories of that before the moon came. And he says that our bodies were in like a plastic form that were very moldable, and it was very different for today. And I don't know what he means by plastic, but also, I mean, he probably wrote that book in German, and now they've translated it into English. There could be a loss there with something. And we were all androgynous. It was male, female, completely like as one. And then we slowly started developing like the need to, and I can't remember how he says it, but to actually physically have to be with another person to have to make another being, and yeah, so we evolved.
Yeah, I think if I remember with Edgar Cayce, he said it was a bit of a punishment because coming from spiritual beings, we are one of our goals on earth, and the reason why we're here, because obviously reincarnation is quite an important part of his beliefs, or especially from the subconscious entity, is that reincarnation exists, and that we have a contract as human beings to come to earth in the physical form to experience the physical issues and pleasures, and to work through certain karmas, if that makes sense. Karma wasn't the word that he used, but to work through certain projects and to increase your understanding and your learnings. Because remember, the third dimension, which is where we are now, is one of the lower dimensions there.
Yeah.
Because from here you then move up to the fourth and the fifth and the sixth, and it keeps going up. But we under a contract, and we had to learn. And once you've learned what you need to learn, then you'll move on. But if you haven't, you come back, and you keep coming back until you've actually learned what you need to learn. Which is I think I've always actually believed that. I've always believed it. But for me, it's difficult. What do you know if you're under contract to learn something? What you should actually know what you're here to learn.
Yeah.
Or is it a case that you shouldn't know, because if you know, you got to get it done within a year or two, and then you're going to want to leave because you're over. So I think you've got to experience the life that you're in with all the stuff that you've got to do. And I don't think it's a case of just learn this and then you're done. I think there's a lot of things that we have to do, and we're under contract to do it in these physical forms before we move on.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
But this is also why I love Edgar Cayce, because his clairvoyant stuff, seeing things in the future, which we will definitely have a podcast later on with Edgar Cayce's other stuff. But with regarding to Atlantis, you know what I mean? He was just the things that he was saying were so specific. And although the scientific community have written it off as it's just a myth. Like we said in the previous podcast, Troy was a myth until they figured it out. until they found Troy. And then this was a myth, and they found that. So everything that they think are myths are actually true stories. And we've discussed this as well about ancient civilizations or pre-civilizations that had technologies that were way beyond what your Bronze Age tools guys were using. I mean, you know what I mean? You guys were using copper axes and wooden this and ivory handles with that. But yet there were buildings there that we can't even replicate today with the technology that we had.
Yeah, exactly.
But, you know what I mean? So there's ancient stuff that obviously from Lemuria, obviously, and it's depicted all around the world, all around.
Yeah, and also it's funny with the Plato thing, because I also read that book, that the priest and whatever, and the priest came to that guy that I think it was Plato's uncle or whatever, and the priest said, you know, you guys are like children because you actually don't know anything about your existence, because there's been so many more existence before this that it just keeps on getting like
further and further back,
extinguished by cataclysms of fire, water, and whatever, and it keeps on happening over and over again. And that's why we keep on coming out like children, because we can never ever know what is really going on, what's in our past or whatever. And it's going to keep on happening. This is what the priest said. This is in Plato's writing, and then he starts talking about Atlantis, how that sunk and whatever. So yeah, it's just it's quite unfortunate that we just keep on getting.
Well, if you look at Edgar, okay, so Edgar Cayce says that maybe it was the same with Rudolf Steiner, that Lemuria existed about 500,000 BC, roundabout, and Atlantis only came into being about 250,000 BC. So that was 250,000 years, and Lemuria was operational and running around.
That's what Rudolf Steiner also said. He said the Lemurians were around even when the crust of the earth wasn't even settled yet, and it wasn't even hardened properly. That's how long ago they were. And
does it say where they came from, the Lemurians? Because I'm assuming they didn't come from Earth. I'm assuming they must have been some sort of entity from outside of the world.
No, it doesn't
outside of Earth.
Say it. No, it doesn't say it. No.
That would be interesting to find that out, because I know that Edgar Cayce says, according to the Cayce records, that where he was or whatever, that the beings that landed up coming into Atlantis were spirit beings, and they were not from Earth.
Oh.
They came from outside. The origins. So yeah, look, obviously that there could be debated, but we know, as we know, Göbekli Tepe, that's already discovered about 10,000 BC. We know that there was some sort of deluge or some massive issue that happened, which was the Younger Dryas. That was 12,500 BC, which is when Atlantis apparently is supposed to have sunk. So I don't know. There's a lot there. There's a lot to kind of take in. Different stories about Atlantis, kind of, but similar in a way. There's a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. So I think you're just going to have to, when you're reading it, just make up your own mind. And I think what you think might be is, but we'll find out, because Edgar Cayce says soon we'll find out what the truth is. Once we find those Hall of Records, the ones in Egypt, and once we find the ones in the Yucatan, we will then understand a lot more of what's going on our planet.
2024, baby.
2024, man.
That's when it's gonna happen. Come on.
Hopefully, man, because every year we're waiting for this shit to come through. Every year nothing happens. I remember all the oaks at the year 2000 were like all gathered around their computers waiting for the whole Y2K. Yeah, and then that didn't happen, and then everybody stood around the campfire waiting for the end of the world at 2012. Remember, 25th of December. Nothing happened there. So, but maybe it did. We just actually all moved on to the next dimension.
Yeah, I know, sure.
You know what I mean?
They all got wiped out. I mean, just shifted into the. Yeah, exactly.
Because Edgar Cayce does seem to say that we are people with amnesia. We've completely forgotten everything of our past.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think that's a good place to leave it.
Yeah, I like it.
And we'll see you guys next year.
Well, not next year. We'll see you next week.
Sorry.
We're ready on next year.
Edit that out. Edit that out, Lee. I'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, we'll see you next week, guys. And thanks again for listening. Again, you can find us on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts and Podbean and Castbox. There's plenty of them that you can find us on. And thank you for supporting us and listening. And yeah, we'll chat again next week. We'll have a fantastic week, and we'll see you then next week.
You too, man. Cheers, Ed.
Cheers, bud. Cheers.